All right, hello. The Hangout is on live now. Welcome everyone to join this discussion about European Parliament elections, aftermath, and discussing what does it actually mean for youth. We have with us joining Theresa Reintke, MEP from the Greens, Eva Paunova, MEP from the European People's Party. Unfortunately, she has a problem with her connection, so she will be commenting to us in written, and we will read that out. Then we have Thomas Maes, Secretary General from the Young European Socialists. He is here with the Hangout, but he has a problem at the moment with the microphone, so we'll try to also take his comments in written form. And then we have Timo Roeleveld from the European Liberal Youth, welcome, and Christophe Leclercq from EurActiv as our media partner, joining the political groups and political party youth organization representatives. So welcome everyone. One of the reasons why we wanted to have this hangout is to discuss a bit, and for us as well to get input on the issue of how different political groups see the issues of youth and how they were addressed in the election and in the process leading up to the election, and what we can take from that forwards. The European Youth Forum, as an umbrella organization, we represent 99 different member organizations, and we were running a campaign before the elections called Love Youth Future. We had a number of pledges which focused on the rights of young people that we asked the candidates to sign up, and we had, now we can report 85 members of the European Parliament that were elected, that have been elected and who have signed some of those pledges. Those pledges are quite varied. They ask for youth participation, better recognition of youth rights, freedom of movement, employment opportunities for young people, quality education. So a lot of issues that really concern young people all across Europe. What we would focus this hangout would be, first of all, on the issue of reflecting on the campaigns, and then the second part, look at the new parliament and its priorities when it concerns youth issues. We will also take questions from what we see from social media or comments, and I will try to bring in also those who have joined but for technical reasons now are a bit out of the picture on the hangout as well. So I would have perhaps a first question for all participants, especially to look at the side of the political parties that were campaigning before the elections. Maybe you can give us a very brief input or view into how did your political groups campaign, and how did you specifically involve young people in the campaign? Because one of the issues that we see from the League of Young Voters that the European Youth Forum started is that political parties do not engage with young people, and therefore there's also a problem of youth participation in numbers, because the youth turnout for European Parliament election has been much lower than it generally is. So this kind of can become a vicious circle when political parties do not engage young people. So perhaps we were trying to have these elections different. So I'd welcome, first of all, Terry, maybe you can start with a point of view from the Greens. Yeah.
Well, in the campaign, in the preparation as well as the implementation, as well as now the follow-up, if I want to call it that, we have really tried to engage young people as much as possible. We have already, by electing a very young person as the leading candidate for the European elections, shown that we really want to include young people in our campaign. We have done that on many different levels. First of all, and most importantly, of course, by many Green candidates supporting the Love Youth Future campaign and the pledges in this campaign from the Youth Forum. We have really tried to address young people by also using social media and online means to have them on board. And I think politically as well as structurally, we have really put the issues of youth as much forward as possible. And from the perspective now, in the situation that we have now with the people being elected, I think we are one of the groups that, at least when we look at the number of young MEPs that were elected, had a very successful outcome. When we look at the engagement of young people that we had during the campaign, I surely think that there can be improvement, but I think it was a good start from the European Greens as well as the Green Group to really prioritize and highlight these issues.
All right, thank you. We have asked also Eva and Thomas to then put their comments in writing, but meanwhile, perhaps we can turn to Timo from the European Liberal Youth.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation as first to mention, and then on the campaign, I think the ALDE campaign was especially done through the member organizations and not so much as a campaign by themselves. I'm myself from the Netherlands, and here we have two liberal parties who both had a different, who both had their own campaigns to get votes. What's one of the important things which we as youth mentioned in our manifesto, which we published before the elections, that we think there should be a single vote all over Europe and not per country and not per party, because this really clouds up a lot how people vote and how they who actually end up in the European Parliament. In youth-wise, a lot of people got involved, mentioned before, through social media. I think it's impossible not to have a campaign on social media by now, especially on a European level, because even now we are using this because it's impossible for us to convene in a city hall. And reaching out to youth in this way is a very good way to get people involved. And I think that would be my first contribution.
All right, thank you. Media, of course, plays a crucial role. One of the issues that we have seen is also that media sometimes reports only specific hot issues. And I think some major media outlets have also been accused of perhaps also only showing what is new or what is some of the extreme parties as well when it comes to the European elections. So perhaps, Christophe, from EurActiv, you can bring in the viewpoint of the media and especially perhaps the European media in the campaign.
Thank you, Allan. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
First of all, let me stress that I'm not a youth representative. I'm probably one of the oldest at EurActiv, but we are delighted to cooperate with the Youth Forum on a number of fronts and to cover the kind of things that you are expressing. And therefore, I'm here even more to listen and learn and perhaps to react on a few points. I do interact also with a number of other youth organizations, and I do have a sense of historic perspective. I would say I've been in these EU circles for 25 years, if I include every different hats I had. Now, to try to answer your question directly and to be a bit provocative, I would say this election round has been a disappointment in terms of involvement of many civil society groups, including the youth, but not only the youth. And this is reflected in the rise of some parties that are not represented around this table. There were a number of things since several years which had been thought of as possibly providing some interesting involvement of the youth. I will not make a full list now to keep it short, but to take two extremes. One is a virtual campaigning tool, the citizen initiatives, and there has been very little impact. there has been very little cooperation of the big social media platforms. There have been, of course, some interesting initiatives, but I was expecting that there would be several past ECIs which would then influence the program of the political parties that you represent, and that it would then lead to major campaigns. I was expecting big movements from the south of Europe, which would have a direct impact on the political programs. There have been some of that, but not very much. And to take something at the other extreme of the spectrum, there was this attempt at a music festival in Strasbourg, closely before the end of the election campaign. I was hoping that it would be a major Woodstock type of thing. I think it has been a success from what I hear. I'm not in the target group, I was not there. I know that the forum was a major player in there, but I wouldn't say that it has made major impact across Europe as some people could have expected. Now, to make a last point, and let's be self-critical, the media itself has not lent sufficient attention to the campaigns. EurActiv has done what it could, and of course, for us, it's a major topic, but not for some other media. There have been some progress with the appointment of European candidates for the presidency of the Commission. And I have no party affiliation, let me make it clear, but I have to say that indeed the Green candidate or the Green co-candidate did make an impact, I think, in that sense, especially in contrast with the others. So that's what I would like to say, and I'm sure you will react to what I say, probably not fully agreeing. I have more comments on the policy in the second part of the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have Thomas from the Young European Socialists also writing that we are traditionally, which means then the Party of European Socialists, we are traditionally one of the least young political families in terms of age. And for the first time now we had a targeted youth campaign that the Party of European Socialists considered youth to be one of their primary target groups, and worked closely also with the youth part of the party, which is the Young European Socialists. And they used mainly social media. What he says is that in since 2009, compared to the outcomes of elections then, there was an increase of 300% in elected young people, which sounds very good, but it still only means that there are only 8 Young European Socialist members that were elected to the European Parliament. And so that they're still behind their Green friends by quite some length. So this is one of the issues in terms of young people themselves, of course, getting elected and being in the Parliament. We have a couple of comments and questions on Twitter. One of them is also about campaigns, perhaps, and in terms of how EU issues, European issues, are reflected in the national media. That only the negative effects and are kind of portrayed by, not only by the media, but sometimes by the political groups, and that the advantages of the European Union are taken for granted. So how are the political groups or political parties in the European Parliament planning to show them that actually the European project is a good thing and it actually works for the benefit of the citizens? Do you think that's an issue in terms of it not being very clear what is the role distribution, what kind of decisions are taken at the European level, what are the national level issues, so that also politicians don't get them confused and won't be able to play the populist card that everything that's bad comes from Europe. I don't know who wishes to comment first.
Well,
Terry?
I think
okay.
Sorry.
All right, Terry. And
I can start. Oh, no. Go ahead, Timo.
Go ahead.
I think one of the problems of the whole setup of how the elections go in for European Parliament, in the end, it's national parties who are trying to get your vote, and after these European elections, there will be the national election. So, in the run-up to national elections, they will want to stress what important things, especially coalition parties, did on a national level. And for opposition parties in general, it would be a very good start to point out what they are going or what they have achieved in the European Parliament and which they can achieve when they get into government in their own country. This national part of the elections, not having truly European parties, is, in my opinion, one of the big problems in, and also which has also been shown. And after the elections, with the formation of the groups, you see now that new parties are joining and or are leaving certain groups for which they have campaigned in the elections.
All right, thank you. Teddy?
Yeah, I also kind of observe this tendency, which we have talked about before, that when something good happens, it was done in Berlin, Paris, or London, and if something bad happens, it was decided in Brussels or Strasbourg. However, I believe that I don't want to, or in the campaign, I was really trying not to get into the trap of either being for more Europe or for less Europe, because I believe that you have to look very closely at the specific topics and the political parties. And I agree with Timo, ideally, European political parties. So we were also really pushing for having a common green European manifesto for these elections, to really have European debates on specific issues. So in the campaign for us, one of the big issues, for example, was TTIP, where we certainly have a different view than the Conservatives or the Liberals, and to really fight about these issues, or to talk about austerity and youth unemployment, and what are the different proposals that the political parties make, not the national parties, but really the political families on a European level. And I think this is better in the end, really, to also motivate people to get active in European politics and to go and vote in the European elections and to further on stay involved. This was one of the crucial aspects from my point of view.
All right, Christophe, you also mentioned that the outcome of elections in engagement was a bit of a disappointment. Do you see that the fact that the national card is played against the European one, is that why so?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question, because
well, that there is this, when parties are campaigning nationally primarily on European issues, they say that, you know, this populist statements that, you know, Europe is bringing us a lot of bad things, and that's why also perhaps these anti-European parties get more votes.
Yes, clearly I think the answer is in the question. I don't think that it's really a problem to have national campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about the fact that Brussels is the scapegoat versus the national capitals, etc., is well known, and I think it's a fact of life in the EU. In my viewpoint, the European campaigns or the European election campaigns were not enough national. Now, I don't mean that they should be nationalistic. I don't mean that one should, go on and on about linking migration and violence, etc. That's obviously not the line I would take. But I think the EU institutions, which now you have a big say in controlling, I'm talking to the young MEPs, have not made enough efforts to localize the campaign and in a way to nationalize the campaign. So if there is a kind of undertone that pan-European campaigns would be better than national campaigns, actually I don't agree. I think we should bring the European policy topics in the countries, and I think the priorities will not be the same in the different countries. If I may speak from a kind of an old wise man's experience, when you come to the Brussels circle, you start by trying to make things more European, and then you realize that to make Europe a success, you need to make them more national. Well.
All right, thank you. Thomas is also commenting on this, that even though the Socialists attempted to run their European campaign based on differences between the political choices at the European level, I guess he's also referring to the Spitzenkandidaten. He's saying that they didn't really stay out of the trap entirely because the Eurosceptic parties managed to very well push for the more traditional families into a pro-anti-EU debate. So unfortunately, it's difficult to answer then these pushes from the Eurosceptics without finding the differences. So basically, the Social Democrats and the European People's Party end up looking very similar, and that, he says, fuels more Euroscepticism. But he also says that we should also bear the responsibility, thus, for insufficiently voicing the criticism about status quo, and that there was actually no pro-European anti-system option available for voters as such. Now, on this issue of whether the vote should take place at the European level or nationally, perhaps, Timo, you can come back to this as well, and maybe Terry, you can also say, so where is the solution in avoiding this populism?
Okay, I think one of the things that populists have been doing really well, which also Thomas mentioned, is make this a pro-anti-EU debate, and with that claiming the whole discussion and pushing us in the defensive, that we first had to debate with people that it is not really a pro-anti-EU debate, and then as a second step we could say what we actually want. And I think in one of the issues that also plays a role there is that there's a lot of misinformation and a lack of information about the actual results of the European Union, which become obvious during election times, but in the time in between there is very little information going from what is happening in Brussels towards all the countries. And I think that's also one of the pitfalls of keeping this on a national level and making people vote on national parties, is that it will always be about national issues because they are voting for a national party. The only way if you can really discuss with each other what you want to do with Europe is if you vote for a European party and what the European party will do and what they won't do. And instead of having a discussion on pro or anti, I think it should be much more about what do you want government or European government to do for you. What do you want a national level government to do, and what do you want regional or local government to do? That would be, or that is our aim. What we are trying to achieve, to have the discussion on the issues and not on pro or anti-EU, which is a non-discussion.
Terry?
Well, I think it's not only a problem that we have been facing in the campaign. I think it is a problem that will go on now. Because as we could see now already in the first weeks, with Martin Schulz being elected the President of the European Parliament and Jean-Claude Juncker now being the designated Commission President, that there is a very strong grand coalition, große Koalition vibe in the Parliament. And I think there is a very big danger in this because it's a little bit going into this direction as well, that you don't have the real fights between the, if you want to call it that, pro-European democratic parties inside of the European Parliament on the European level where they should take place, but you probably still have the fights in the Council between the member states, and then you have the fights, well, pro or anti-Europe. And I believe, as I said before, that it would make much more sense to get people motivated to debate European issues or get people interested in European issues, to have the fights in the European Parliament, which is the only directly elected institution in the European Union, between the political groups that are democratic. I don't want to call them pro-European now because, yeah, that are democratic and that want to constructively shape Europe. And if we have a situation now that the big coalition is just, you know, pushing everything through, I think it's going to be a big danger for European democracy.
All right, thank you. There are a couple of comments again on social media as well. There are some thoughts about youth absenteeism. One person saying that should we perhaps start thinking about voting over the internet as a solution to youth absenteeism. Christophe a bit also commented on the virtual engagement before as well. And there is a question actually, are there now in this parliament enough young MEPs that represent the values of the youth? And there is also a question perhaps for the European Youth Forum itself in terms of evaluating whether the campaign, the League of Young Voters, actually has helped to motivate young people to turn out at the European Parliament elections. Well, for this question, I can already say that it is indeed, in the European Youth Forum, we also see that we need to put more attention to the actual issues at the elections. So this is something we try to do with the League of Young Voters as well. We're still gathering the information, and the Parliament also doesn't have the official information about youth participation rate compared to the overall turnout. So this is something we're actually going to be looking closely at. But we know a couple of good examples. For example, in Lithuania, there was quite a good campaign around youth issues, and there they already have published statistics that youth turnover from the last national elections, though they compared to the national elections, did increase quite significantly by almost twice. So that there are also more young people in some countries engaging. Then you would have to indeed look at how was the election run, what kind of issues were debated. Was it about pro or anti-EU, or was it about more issues than that? To sum up this issue of evaluating the elections, what would you say from each of your groups, or also from Christophe from the point of view of the media? What are the lessons learned? What are the specific things we have to put in place to make sure that the next European Parliament elections are better from this point of view? So who would want to? All right, we now seem to have Eva joining us as well, but Christophe.
I think it works now.
Go ahead.
All right, perfect. Do you want to comment, Eva, immediately step into the discussion?
I just heard the last question, I guess, whether we have enough young MEPs to represent youth ideas in Europe. I have to say that I was surprised during last mandate to learn that the average age of MEPs is 55 years old. And it seems to me that it hasn't changed actually throughout the new mandate. So it's again 55 or 56. It's debatable what's the exact average age. Which of course I'm sure we all are very much in favor of the wisdom and what we can learn because we are young, and some might say we are inexperienced, but at the same time we are the people that have the fresh and new ideas, and we have, how to say, the urge to just decide to do what we feel it's right to do. We don't have this type of days and moments where we think, oh, maybe politically more correct, this is better, or we just do it. We go with our feelings. I go with my gut feeling. I go the way I think it's right to do it. And sometimes you need a bit of this boldness, because you don't always, when you're more experienced, you think it's better not to be as bold as young people could be. So I think there are excellent young MEPs to represent the youth, but it definitely wouldn't be bad if we see more young people further ahead on their party lists.
All right, thank you, Eva. And we're very happy that both you, Eva, and Terry have joined us as some of those young MEPs as well, and that you're engaged with the issues. But maybe all right, Thomas, you seem to have solved perhaps we're trying to see if Thomas can, or we can hear Thomas, but it does not seem to be the case, unfortunately, at the moment still. No. Okay, Christophe, please.
Thank you, Allan. Two things I would like to say. First, about the tools of engagement, and secondly, about some possible topics based on my sorry, old wise man experience. Regarding the tools, any kind of marketing campaign, be it political or marketing, commercial, etc., should have a qualitative dimension and then a quantitative dimension. And I think we should, for the next election, start very early. We should start by having much better policy discussions, like 3 years before the elections, on some broad topics and then by party. Yesterday we had a presentation at the Parliament, and I was glad to get to know Eva there regarding policy tools. We had some presented by EurActiv, some by some contributions from Facebook, BBC, an opinion poll company called Comres, and all these tools should be used in the next mandate in order to deepen the qualitative engagement. There has been a tendency in the last few years to confuse real policy debates with engagement on social media, measuring the hundreds of thousands of likes or trying to measure the number of signatures on ECIs. These are not policy debates. This is the other stage of it, which is a quantitative part. But if you have not had substantial discussions with informed circles, then the quantitative parts later on will not work. It's like saying that you can bear an ECI with 7 citizens and then get to 1 million citizens. It doesn't work. You need to involve the NGOs, the civil society, which are thousands of people, but not millions of people. Now, regarding topics, if you give me 2 more minutes, Allan, my experience goes back a long time. It's lobbying for the Erasmus program. I was a student leader the year Eva was born, when we lobbied the key capitals for Erasmus. There were some nice ideas in Brussels that nobody heard about, and of course the big capitals were against it because they had their own student exchanges. So we talked with lots of MEPs. There were young MEPs in those days too, not as many, and it's never enough, of course. And we talked with many youth organizations, and there was a kind of coalition. If I recall correctly, it was not terribly formal, but it was very clear that everybody was pushing in the same direction. So what I would like to hear from the young MEPs and from the youth branch of the political parties is what are the 2 or 3 very practical, concrete programs that they could address, and preferably on a less ideological basis, because you have to go beyond your inborn, it's not the right word, you have to go beyond your traditional ideologies in order to move forward. You're not going to agree on TTIP, that's very clear, but you could tackle some other topics. And first, maybe consider changing the language. I've heard a lot in this discussion and in previous discussions about youth unemployment. I'd like that you focus on youth employment, on creating jobs. And for that, you will need to move beyond the political boundaries. You will need to think of what does it take for an employer to hire people. You will need to think not only of insisting on internships being paid, that is an important principle, but also increasing the number of internships, which is perhaps even more important. So here's my challenge to all of you. What are the 2 or 3 topics where you could have a proper discussion across party lines and agree to lobby for it? Thank you.
All right, Christophe. Terry?
I just wanted to say that now for the actual policy work, I very much agree with you that I think we will have very vivid discussions also in the youth intergroup that is hopefully going to be revived on what we can do now on an unideological basis in order to improve the situation of young people. But before was the campaign. And I mean, I don't think that you can mobilize big groups of young people by telling them that actually whether you vote conservative, social democrat, liberal or green, it doesn't really make any difference because we are going to eventually agree because we are not ideological. So this is, I think, a very a different perspective on how you have to approach the problem of how to, well, get engaged with young people. And in the campaign, it's a different challenge than now, as we are going to work on youth policies. And I very much agree with you that there need to be points. Well, the Erasmus program is one of the issues, but I mean the big youth initiative that we have at the moment, the youth is actually called the Youth Employment Initiative, and we will, I think, all work on together to have a proper implementation of the youth guarantee, which I think we need to have a very close look at what the member states are going to do now with it and how they're going to implement it, because the most, I would say, devastating thing for young people in Europe would be that, well, the European Commission or the European Union told them that they would get something, and then it doesn't actually reach the young people on the ground. So this will be, if you ask me what is the thing that I really want to work on, together with other young MEPs and together with people from other groups, this is really what I want to have a look at and implement it in a way that it's going to reach young people.
All right, thank you. Timo?
I think about the Erasmus project. I think one of the big successes of the Erasmus project is bringing people across borders and giving them a European perspective, which they can then, if they come home, also give to others around them. As a as a political youth organization in Europe, that's one of our main points as well, is to exchange the ideas we have across borders and to find out where we agree and where we don't agree. And then bringing that message or that discussion further into on the national level. The issues which we could discuss are, of course, very plural. It's a lot of areas where we can debate. I mean, you choose any and we can discuss on it. One of the things which we as a youth organization are trying to do is not to go too much into policies, but really stay within our ideology and try to discuss from ideology to where we would want Europe to go, and also to find out how different the perspectives are. If you ask somebody who identifies with liberalism in Finland and somebody in Catalonia or in Portugal, they have a very different perspective, and I think those perspectives within our the groups in the European Parliament go beyond the borders already, and that's I think that's one of the complications. It's such an integrated network of people that the only way you can eventually discuss with each other is through having debates with each other. And I think the quality of a debate is not so much about crossing the boundaries of the political parties, but much more at the moment crossing the national borders, because I think those national borders are much more of a problem for Europe than the political borders, which we already find with the Grand Coalition are very easy to cross.
All right, thank you. Thomas is also writing about this issue in terms of whether we should bring up issues that we can commonly agree on a European level, but he says that he doesn't really agree with this approach, that this is actually the reason, for example, populists gain a lot of audience, is that if we identify topics on which we all agree, there is no reason for people to vote. That's what Thomas says. And also that we do not necessarily agree that it's necessary to have a positive focus, because, for example, it is quite important that we identify youth employment as a problem to be solved, but it cannot be solved simply by saying we will create jobs without evaluating the general conditions. Thus, we have to identify youth unemployment and its roots, which lay in the austerity policies of the past years, so that there is actually first to address the issue of austerity and then to focus on job creation policies. So this is coming from the young European socialist perspective. Similarly, he says that even though we disagree on for example, the TTIP, the trade deal between EU and US, that promises to be a key issue, actually, where there will be and where voters can identify a real political debate at the European level, which then, if publicized and made available to people, can show people that there is an actual choice. So this is what Thomas was writing to comment on this. this is already taking us into some of the discussions around the issues. You already mentioned youth employment and mobility is a question connected to that as well. When it comes to youth employment, for example, and if we take that as an issue now, you've been all focusing on this a bit as well. What we take from this is that European Parliament needs to be much more clearer towards the citizens in terms of impact, so that people will see what are the actual issues decided at the European level. And that is kind of the basis of improving the campaigns in the future. So what would you say are the concrete measures that the European Parliament can take, let's say in the first 6 months of the new Parliament, that will lead to actually either, getting rid of this austerity policy from one point of view, or then from the other point of view, how can those quality jobs be created? What is the role of the European Parliament in this? So I don't know who wants to step in this. Eva, perhaps? Or?
Yeah, well, see, I think it's very difficult to say that in the next 6 months the Parliament can create these jobs, for the pure reason that especially we as EPP, we believe that jobs are created by the businesses and by the industries. And what we can do here as parliamentarians is create the right basis for businesses to create the necessary jobs. And I would agree with the previous speakers that I think we are absolutely able to work when it comes to creating more jobs for the young people, because what young people very much want right now is to be able to start their career. And of course, they don't know how the jobs are created. All they want is to have a job. And we, as being elected, many of us, by young people, we need to make sure that we work on the right policies all the time, not just in the first 6 months, but all the time, and make sure that our political groups have youth employment, jobs, and growth as key priorities for these legislative terms. And I'm sure this is what every one of us has been trying to push forward. I mean, I will be very honest that in the first initial paper, which we produced at the EPP group as our strategy, there was a little emphasis on topics such as education and job employment, which after a very vivid discussion within the EPP group was changed, and this became a very, very key part of our entire strategy. So there's our own ways to push forward that this topic is more discussed and is put forward on the table, as well as throughout the commissioners' hearing. We need to push forward that this topic is widely discussed and different ideas are discussed as you know, when we talk for concrete ideas. You mentioned Erasmus. Well, I think we should encourage more programs like the Erasmus program, more cross-border programs, because I want that you know, young people in Europe call themselves Europeans rather than by their own nationalities. Of course, we should all perceive our own identity, but in the end of the day, programs like Erasmus, which most of us have benefited from, I think they're wonderful, and we need to build on top of them and create more. And we here as members, we should give ideas for such programs to be created. I mean, for example, one thing which I've suggested with a colleague of mine was to propose a framework for recognition of voluntary service and extracurricular activities that can help young people find their first job. So this is just one example out of many, you know, we can discuss and as well as propose to the commissioner, to the forthcoming new commission.
All right, thank you. Teddy?
Yeah, I would partly disagree with what has just been said, because I think the European Parliament will have a major role into pushing for sustainable investments, especially in the countries where the youth unemployment is really high, because there is nothing coming from the European level And at the moment, I really see that the European Parliament would be the only institution that could really push for this. If there would be nothing coming from the European level, I don't think that you could just expect businesses to grow from scratch in countries like Spain, Greece, or Portugal, where the economic situation is really difficult. So I believe that just stating that we need to wait and I don't know, create better educational opportunities for young people and not really also having macroeconomic measures from the European level being pushed for by the European Parliament. I think that this little, and for this also the problem of youth unemployment, and I'm going to state here because it is a problem and we need to analyze it. The problem of youth unemployment in many European countries is far too big. So I also see my responsibility as a young European, because unless we have major investments, I think that the situation will not significantly change for young people in Europe. And I'm very, very, very sorry, but I have to go soon. I just wanted to say it before other people start speaking, because yeah, I have another appointment. I wanted to thank you for this wonderful debate, and if there is a chance to follow up or to have another debate like this, I'd be really, really much interested.
Thank you very much, Terry, for joining us. Of course, life of an MEP is very busy, we understand that. And we'd love to, of course, be further in touch with you. Thomas is also writing that he fully agrees with bye-bye.
Bye.
Thomas is also saying that he agrees with what Terry has been saying, that there needs to be attention to the macroeconomic policy, and that is something that the European Parliament can very actively push for. Timo, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, I think I will take a bit of a different perspective than the previous speakers, because I think in general governments don't create jobs. I think that's really up to the economy. And that's also one of the things that with youth unemployment, we need to make sure that businesses start hiring young people, and that we protect young people from being abused by staying in internships which are not paid for or not paid correctly. And that if we do investments, it should be very smart investments. It should be in sustainability. It should be in areas where national governments cannot or won't put as much effort, and that will be my call to the European Parliament, to really seek areas where national or cross-border investments in sustainable, or which add to the sustainability of the whole system. On the macroeconomic part, I think as well that it's one of the things which Europe should really, or the European Parliament, they can really focus on, is to make sure that that the protection of these young workers is not left to national governments, but that these rights of young people are protected, and they should be protected, and that those things should be in the regulations coming from, or in the advices coming from the European Parliament. Last point, because I know I started with quite a bold statement, is that I also understand that governments do have an important role, but I think the youth unemployment as a specific issue is not only a European issue, it's a national issue, it's a local issue, and especially it's a very private drama. And I think in making young people entrepreneurs, getting them into jobs, making sure that employers want young employees, I think that should be our main focus.
All right, thank you. Christophe, do you have to add anything to this debate about issues and policies? I think we just actually lost Christophe. Eva, do you have anything additional to comment on this as well?
Yeah, actually, just, I mean, a couple of things probably wasn't right, but I also believe that we need to create the right environment for the business to create the jobs. And I do think that employers should look for more young people to hire and find the right ways, and we are here the ones to provide the right regulations for how these young people to be hired, because very often employers do not want to hire people without experience or people that just been in an internship for a long time. And it's about to clarify and find ways to make it better understandable for employers when they want to hire somebody young who's just graduated from university but who already has an experience either as a volunteer or as intern.
All right, thank you very much. Thomas is commenting on this that youth unemployment is an issue created by policies, and that is a bit of a disaster because of austerity. So this is also, if that's the source, then this policy needs to be changed, and it doesn't happen by abstract businesses or economy. That's what Thomas comments. Christophe, do we still have you on board?
Yes.
All right.
Are you giving me the floor?
Yes, if you would want to add.
First of all, my apologies, I was cut off for 2 or 3 minutes, but I do get the gist of the discussion. It's natural that you are all still a bit in a campaigning mode, but I would like to insist on my earlier point about crossing ideological boundaries, and I would say it the same way if Terry was still around. If you keep going on and on, you know, the Socialists, that it's the fault of the austerity, EPP, that it's a lack of competitiveness for business, and the Greens, that it's a lack of green investments. If you keep going like that for the next few years, you will not have more young people voting in the elections and voting for you. Now the elections are behind you. It doesn't mean that you have to forget about your promises, etc., but you now represent the general interest, and your job, whether in the Grosse Coalition or not, is to help the EU make policy decisions faster with an impact for the people. So you do have to cross those boundaries, and I hope that as young people, you have a still fairly flexible mind, more than your elder statespeople in your parties, and that you can work together better than those who have been fighting each other for 30 and 40 years. Let me make a practical example. Now, the EU will have to replace its former Lisbon agenda, which is also known as Europe 2020, with something else. Clearly, it would not be acceptable now that we are in somewhat of a post-crisis mode and that there is a demand for new policies. It would not be acceptable to just go on with the agenda Europe 2020, which very few people at national level have understood. So here is an opportunity at the top of the iceberg, so to say. I will not talk about specific policies, to shape how the overall program of the next European Commission, supported by a majority in the Parliament, will be called. Traditionally, this agenda is built as a triptych. It's to try to satisfy everybody, so you have a bit of competitiveness, a bit of social, and a bit of green, and altogether it makes a kind of compromise. But it has not made an impact. So maybe you, the young people, could contribute to finding something that would meet your needs, but which would be a bit more dynamic. And here's my suggestion. Talk about innovation. Talk about change, because we need lots of change. Business wants it. Social circles want it. There is some change required in the EU institutions themselves, and certainly in the way the Commission is managed. This is underway. Whether it will be enough or not is up to you. I would suggest as umbrella topic for the next European Commission, and therefore as State of the Union speech by Jean-Claude Juncker, if and when he will be supported by the Parliament, to use the word innovation, and to use a date that is a good date, 2019, which is the end of the mandate. That's when you face the elections again, and that's when the Commission should either be supported in its policies or should be voted down. Here's my suggestion.
All right, thank you very much for this interesting analysis. I'll turn back to you to also reply to our other participants on this specific issue. In terms of perhaps how we should be addressing the upcoming 5 years. So if you want to comment, Eva first maybe?
Did you say how we should be addressing the youth from
No,
now
sorry.
on? Was that your question?
What Christophe was saying, that basically, new issues should be on the agenda, and perhaps we should come out of the shell of this different political
yes,
parties.
But I mean, probably. Yeah, well, the thing is this, that I mean, throughout my campaign, and yes, I do understand we're no longer campaigning. But the thing that I think was most interesting was that I didn't talk with the same words as a politician who's been in politics for 5, 10, 15, 25 years would talk. So I think this made the difference. And yes, definitely some of the words that I keep on using all the time when meeting citizens, and in a country like Bulgaria, it's not very easy to get close to people when digitalization, high technologies and innovation. Still there is a circle where if you talk in this way, you're very well understood, but you're not always understood. Still, I did it, and this is the way I talk to people, because I believe this is what is going to drive Europe forward. I truly believe in this, and that's why I want to work also on that topics. But of course, it's there are different target groups and different things they're interested in. I mean, citizens have a variety of interests, but when it comes to the youth, this is definitely what they're most interested in. And this is what I figure out in the past weeks campaigning, but also what I figure out when I'm here in the European Parliament and when I talk to young people. The good thing is that people that already been in the Parliament for quite some time, they're also very keen on this topic, because they understand that this is what can generate further interest towards our work. And then, of course, it's the way we communicate to the citizens of Europe, and whether we send the right message back to them so that they can understand what we're actually trying to do. But I agree, the closer we are to our citizens and we address their concerns, but we also have to explain what comes in the next years, what's the future, and how we need to achieve growth and jobs, and how are we going to foster the economy being back on the track it used to be before the crisis, and even better. So definitely, I mean, this is the way we need to approach our citizens, and as well as have this type of working attitude here in the Parliament. If we fall back into an old political talk, I don't think we will be re-elected.
All right, thank you. Thomas is saying that he agrees with the idea of putting innovation at the center, but obviously he doesn't agree with the cross-party bit. Also because between elections, we are still politicians and not technocrats. That's what Thomas is saying. Timo, would you like to comment? And I'm also conscious of time. In a few minutes we'll be having full of 1 hour, so we'll try to wrap up after this as well. Timo.
Okay, I will. First of all, I think to address young people, you have to talk about the future and how you want this, the future. What changes do you want towards the future? On the issue of innovation, I think innovation is very objectively based on research. I think it's not really what politics is about. I think politics is much more on a subjective level, and much more is instead. And I think that's also what separates our political parties or our political ideologies. I think one of the challenges for politicians always has been is to come from your principles and use them to create real or to bring them to policies. And you need to communicate that in a way that people understand what you're actually trying to or what you're achieving. For us, of course, one of the things which we find very important, and if we talk about change, I think we'll not agree on the direction the change should go, but I think we all agree that there should be changes, both in the campaign as now. For us, of course, one of the major changes is going to a smaller government, and that also means lowering the debts of all the governments in Europe. And one of the things that we find very important is to have individual freedoms and tolerance. And those things are should really be on the center point of our focus for the coming 5 years. Because if we want people to elect us as liberals again, we should focus on those points. And that also goes for all the other parties. To get elected in 5 years again, you should make or should have the same people, or at least the same people, and stay in that direction, and keep pushing, keep going.
All right, thank you. One of the comments that is coming up on Twitter, and before we wrap up as well, is what you've been mentioning as well, is the issue of internships. And the European Youth Forum has also been pushing forward of getting recognition on a good quality charter on internships, and to also see whether the European Parliament itself is actually implementing it. And there are a couple of questions around the fact that this is mainly addressed to members of Parliament, is that are the members of Parliament planning to, and especially I think Eva we have at the moment here, planning to take on interns? And then the question is, are these internships going to be of good quality? For example, are they paid? So this is an issue in which I think probably members of Parliament can also not act just from a policy point of view of enacting policies, but also in terms of how do you put certain things in practice within an organization. So if you want to comment in your final round on this, that would be also welcome. But for the final question, I would like to ask you, there have been now quite a lot of interesting ideas put forward from you, or perspectives, but a lot of them are about wishes that we would like to see that are going to be better in the future. So if you would say in one sentence and very short, in 5 years, what is going to be different when we're going to go towards the election of the next European Parliament?
Very short, because I would also need to leave, if you don't mind. I just hope that in 5 years we won't be talking about youth unemployment anymore. It's probably going to be very difficult because it takes more than 5 years to tackle the problem around Europe, not just in certain member states. But I hope we can have topics on how to talk on topics on how to further boost innovation, how to further boost our educational system, which would already be at a level where students would remain in Europe, would like to establish themselves as entrepreneurs in Europe, and do not necessarily need to overseas. And on the topic of internships, yes, apart from with legislation, MEPs have the option to get up to 3 interns per month, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm actually currently working on a job description for interns, which should be available next week, because I'm looking for interns with different profiles, some of them to work more as even long-term advisors for a certain committee or a report, which can be an internship up to 6 months, and others to be an intern for 2-3 months to get acquainted with the work of the European Parliament, with the institutions, with the MEPs, with the work here in my office specifically. So I would have 2 different types of job descriptions for interns, and I'll be very happy to receive CVs to review. So that's all from me. That's okay. I have another engagement outside of the Parliament, so I'll have to leave, and the weather's not very nice, so it probably will take me much longer to arrive, not as expected. So thanks so much, and I look forward to being invited to another webinar.
Thank you very much, and all the best.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thomas is commenting on this, that in 5 years, the political groups in the European Parliament will have shown themselves to be political actors with their agreements and also their differences being clear, so that then people will see actually what difference does it make if they go to vote for one or the other party. And he also says that when it comes to internships, then the young European socialists themselves do not hire interns, but that's all right, because the question was anyway more towards MEPs. So I'll allow the last reflection first to Timo, and then Christophe, you can also try to wrap it up from your side.
Okay, I hope in 5 years we will not have a pro or anti-EU debate anymore. I hope we have a kind of framework for our discussion on what we want the EU to focus on, and it is and that we that the differences between the parties becomes much clearer, or of the groups in the European Parliament, and that people will be held accountable for their voting and for how they have or their attendance during the whole the coming 5 years. Also, what I think, I also hope, together with Eva, that youth unemployment will not be an issue anymore. I don't hope that we will talk about unemployment in general, but I hope it will be off the agenda in that way that we have come up with a kind of systematic approach how to solve this issue. Keeping in mind that it's not only a European problem, but it's a problem across all levels, down to the individual problem of those people who are unemployed. And since employment is so important for building your own personality, to being able to travel, being able to enjoy the freedoms of living in Europe, I really hope that we get that problem solved at least.
All right, thank you very much. And Christophe.
Thank you, Allan. I have 4 remarks. I realize that 2 MEPs have left, but I suppose these talks and images remain available online thanks to the Youth Forum, and so maybe the upcoming assistants and interns can report to them on the feedback I provide to them, and also to Timo, of course. First, regarding interns, EurActiv does take interns every year, both in Brussels and in any of its 12 locations. They are always paid, of course, and every week we turn down some people who would love to make unpaid internships, and we have to reflect about that. People are talking about getting the right conditions, quality internships, etc. I didn't hear anybody talking about the number of interns which are accommodated and trained every year. This is at least as important. This is the challenge, not only to get people paid, but to get more people in training situations as opposed to being idle in the streets, so to say. Secondly, regarding youth employment, which I think is the main topic we addressed during this debate, I would really hope that the parties and the trade unions and the business organizations can work together on some schemes to bring more people in employment situations. There have been some controversial attempts at national level, having lower minimum salaries for young people without experience. I know it's controversial, but if it works, why not consider it for a limited time? We could also talk about reducing the social security dues. It's much better to have somebody in employment not contributing to social security yet, rather than paying unemployment benefits. Third remark, I noticed that a lot of people, and maybe that was part of the agenda for the discussion, are very focused on getting re-elected in 5 years. Maybe that's their experience, they are young, they tried hard to be on a certain level on the list, and they keep trying, already thinking of next time. But this is not the job of an MEP. This is a carrot, but really the job of an MEP is to shape better policies, and I hope they will do that. Now, the final thing is a little bit idealistic, coming back to the point I made earlier on Erasmus. This has nothing to do with job employment, etc. I think the youth also need to have some big picture visions, and making peace in the east of Europe, bringing Russians and Ukrainians together, ensuring that after Putin there will be even more democratic societies in the east of Europe is also very important. There are 250 million people who live outside the EU, but who are Europeans and who feel themselves as Europeans. Russians probably will never be EU citizens, but we should also think about them. The Erasmus system is in place in those countries, but the numbers are ridiculous. And most of the places are allocated on the basis of relationships or worse, if you see what I mean. So this is an example of a topic which could seize the attention of the young people. And if we would meet more Ukrainians and Russians and Turks, etc., in Europe, not yet with work permits for the moment, we would get to know them better, and that would be a lasting contribution, so that when these young MEPs are really in power as commissioners, then we should have practical improvements like internships and jobs, but also a vision for the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the very useful input that we can perhaps use in the European Youth Forum in pushing forwards the youth agenda. But also these discussions always serve as a way of getting new ideas for everyone. So I hope that you as well have found this debate useful, and thank you all for joining. Thank you all the people as well who joined us to view the YouTube stream, as well as commenting on the social media and on the Twitter. Thank you very much, and bye-bye from our side.
And Allan, thank you very much for taking the initiative and for your moderation. We had very good cooperation with your predecessor as a Secretary General, and we look forward to the same for the coming years. Bye-bye.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan.